Today you'll be learning about the Pythagorean Theorem. So let's start off with learning the Pythagorean Theorem and some vocabulary. So the Pythagorean Theorem is a formula used to find the length of a side of a right triangle. So let's recall a right triangle is a triangle with one right angle. And a right angle is 90 degrees. And you can see that an angle is 90 degrees when you have a box in the corner. Okay, now here's the Pythagorean theorem. It is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and that's something you need to memorize. It's really easy though. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. So let's look at some vocabulary because we're going to practice this in a second. So the hypotenuse is going to be the longest side of a right triangle. It's always the opposite of the right angle, and it's represented by c in the Pythagorean theorem. So if you look at this triangle, here's your right angle. Okay, your legs make up your right angle. So I like to remember it as my legs are holding up my right angle. And then my hypotenuse is going to be opposite. It's going to be across from that right angle. So it will never touch this right angle. Okay, now the legs are the two sides that meet at the 90-degree angle. We represent those as A and B in the Pythagorean theorem. So in your Pythagorean theorem, A and B are representing these legs, and C is representing the hypotenuse. So now let's practice by labeling the hypotenuse and the legs of each triangle. Remember, the legs are going to form the right angle. I want you to pause the video, try this on your own, and then come back and check your work. Okay, now that you've paused the video, you're going to check your work. So let's look at this first triangle. So the legs make up the right angle here, and the hypotenuse is across from the right angle. Okay, this triangle is turned on its side, but it's still the same. The legs make up the right angle, and the hypotenuse is across from the right angle. Here, the legs make up the right angle, and the hypotenuse is across from the right angle. One more. So be careful when you're identifying the legs and the hypotenuse of right triangles. Now we're going to practice finding the hypotenuse of a right triangle. So again, my legs make the right angle. My legs are 3 and 4. X is the hypotenuse, so we don't know what the hypotenuse is. So we can use Pythagorean theorem to find that. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So again, we know the legs are 3 and 4. Now, it really doesn't matter which one you choose as which leg you choose as A and which leg you choose as B. Doesn't matter. So you can say A is 3 or you can say B is 3. It doesn't matter. In this case, let's just use 3 for A. So you're going to say replace a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So we know A is 3. We know B is 4. And we don't know C, so we're going to call that X. So remember, 3 squared means 3 times 3. 3 times 3 is 9. We know 4 squared means 4 times 4, which is 16. Okay, and so we're going to add those two together. So 9 plus 16 equals 25. Okay, so we know that x squared equals 25. And we don't know x. So remember, x squared means x times x. So we got to think, what times what gives us 25? So x times x equals 25. So what times what equals 25? You can solve this in two ways. You can think in your head, well, I know 5 times 5 is 25. Or you can take the square root of 25, because the opposite of squaring a number is the square root. So here I want you to write x equals the square root of 25, or 5, because we know 5 times 5 is 25. Now later on we're going to get some hypotenuse that do not come out as a nice neat whole number, and sometimes it's nicer to just leave it under the radical. Remember, this is called our radical. So I want you to know how to do that anyways. Okay, let's look at the next one. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. So our legs are making up this right angle, so 12 and 9. So let's replace A with 12, B with 9. Remember, it doesn't matter either way. We don't know our hypotenuse c, so that's x. So 12 squared is 12 times 12, which is 144, plus 9 squared is 9 times 9, which is 81. Okay, and we know if we add 144 plus 81, we get 225. Okay, so, and if you want to, you can highlight, you can copy and paste. So we know x squared equals 225. So we need something times something gets us 225. So we can take the square root of 225. If you have your calculator, remember you can do second and use the x squared button and type in 225. If you don't have a calculator with you, you can open a new tab and you can type in the square root of 225. And that's going to give you 15. Okay. Okay, now let's continue practicing. I would really like for you to pause the video, try these two on your own, and come back and check. Okay, now that you've paused the video, our legs 3 and 9. So A is 3, B is 9. Again, if you did it the other way, you'll still get the same answer. We don't know our hypotenuse, so that's x. So 3 squared is 3 times 3, which is 9. 9 squared is 9 times 9, which is 81. If we add those together, we get 89. So to find x, we know something times something gives us 89. And I can't do something times something in my head gives me 89. So this is where it's important to do the square root of 89. So remember, if you don't have a calculator at home, just open a new tab and say the square root. Then I'm going to say 89 because that's what we were looking for. Okay, and it gives us, and you can press equals if you want, 9.4339. Let's just round to the nearest tenths place. So this is our tenths place 4. If you look behind 4, there's a 3. 3 is less than 5, so we keep 4 the same, 9.4. Okay, so let's go back to our screen. Okay, the next, we know our legs are 4 and 8. 4 squared is 4 times 4, which is 16. 8 squared is 8 times 8, which is 64. And again, we don't know the hypotenuse, so that's x squared. So 16 plus 64 is going to give you 80. And so we got to figure out what times what gives us 80. If you're not sure, again, use your calculator. And in my head, I can't find the square root of 80. So we can type this in as the square root of 80. Or if you find the square root of 80, it says 8.944. Let's just round that to 8.9. Okay. Okay, now we're going to solve for a missing leg. We know the hypotenuse and we know a leg. So here's my hypotenuse is 10 and my leg is 6. So let's just, it doesn't matter A or B, but let's just say B is 6 and C, our hypotenuse is 10. Okay, so we know that 6 squared is 6 times 6, which is 36. So the easiest thing to do is highlight all of this, copy, Control C, and Control V. So I know 6 times 6 is 36, and I know 10 times 10 is 100. This is just an equation. So remember, I want to get A by itself, and I need to make 36 zeros. So think, how do I make 36 0? Well, I can subtract 36. So 36 minus 36 is 0. Remember, what I do to one side, I must do to the other side of the equation as well. So remember, this is 0, and anything plus 0 is itself. So we don't actually need that. So 100 minus 36 is 64. So I know that x, in this case, is our leg A. I could have changed this to x. Is the square root of 64. We know something times something gives us 64, and that's a perfect square. So that's actually 8. So we know our side length is 8. So let's try another one. Okay, so we know our legs are x and A. So 8, and our hypotenuse is 10. Okay, so this time I'm just going to plug in our leg for A. Okay, and I'm going to say our missing leg is x, and our hypotenuse is 10. So we know that 8 squared is 8 times 8, which is 64. And we know 10 times 10 is 100. Again, I want to solve for x, so I need to make 64 zeros. So I know 64 minus 64 is 0. So what I do to one side, I must also do to the other to balance the equation. So 0, this cancels. So if I do 100 minus 64, you get 36. So x squared equals 36. So to find x, we can take the square root of 36, and the square root of 36 is also a perfect square, which is 6. And you know 6 times 6 is 36. Okay, so let's try a couple more examples. So here I know my leg is x, and my other leg is 1.5, and my hypotenuse is 2.5. So I'm going to take and copy and paste. So 1.5 times 1.5 is 2.25. Okay, and then 2.5 squared means 2.5 times 2.5, which is 6.25. Again, we're trying to solve this equation. We want to get x by itself and make 2.25 0. So we need to subtract. So what we do to one side, we do to the other. Okay. So 6.25 minus 2.25 gives you 4. So we know x squared equals 4. And to find x, we know something times something gives us 4. So we can say the square root of 4 or 2, because we know 2 times 2 is 4. Let's try another. So the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Our legs are x and 2. So let's just say x and 2. We know the hypotenuse is 4. So we know that 2 squared means 2 times 2, which is 4. And we know 4 squared is 4 times 4, which is 16. Again, we want to solve for x. We need to make plus 4 0, so you subtract 4. What you do to one side, you do to the other. 16 minus 4 is 12. And to solve for x, we take the square root of 12. So something times something gives you 12. So we're going to do the square root of 12, which is 3.46. That's 6 rounds 4 up to 5. So we'll say 3.5. Okay, this is some mixed practice. I want you to pause the video, and then I want you to come back and check your work. Okay, now that you have finished, please check your answers. So just make sure if you missed number 2 or number 4, 20 and 19 are your hypotenuse. So remember, you would have had to subtract the square of 10 from 20 and the square of 17 from 19. So just be careful with those. Now you're going to take your Google Forms quiz. Please use your notes to study and use your calculator to help you show your work on paper, also to help you not make careless mistakes.